We will be discussing episodes 4 through 6 of Andor season 2. Neither of us has seen, well, you've seen episode 7. No spoilers. I haven't seen any of 7 through 9. So we will be spoiling anything.
It's all about Ewok.
Up to
episode 7 is
spoiler alert. One small spoiler, and the rest will be spoiler free. So anything from season 1, anything from Rogue One is fair game, as well as episodes 1 through 6. And glad you all are here with my friend Ed Goode, who writes at Imago Scriptura. And when we post this, I want to post a link to your May the 5th post, because it was just the most adorable thing. Grogu made the rounds in your neighborhood, and it was really, really sweet. It had a great adventure. So we will share that with all of you. So if you are joining us for the first time, what we do is completely unprepared. I mean, each of us prepare, but we don't know what the other person's going to bring. But we ask each of us to bring 2 nuggets, things from this latest crop of episodes that we will discuss together, and especially with a faith lens, a justice lens, philosophical lens, whatever we bring as pastors and leaders. And I think you have something to kick us off with, Ed, before we dive in.
I do, and it's solely because I'm a dad. Which is something that came to me as I was out walking today.
Yes.
With my dog Scout, who is not with me today, sadly. She is at home. But which was just simply a question. I think I texted this to MaryAnn at about 7:00 this morning. What do you call a canine that fights the Empire?
I don't know, Ed. What do you call a canine that fights the Empire?
And dog.
But so we're just bad. Yes. Do you listen to Dear Hank and John? Do you listen to that podcast?
I have, but not regularly. So
yeah, Hank always starts with a dad joke. So you are in excellent company.
Excellent.
Oh, and those of you who have heard me before know that I don't normally sound quite this croaky, but I'm still getting over the cold that I had last week. And so I've been trying to rest my voice to be able to bring this conversation to you. So last week, I started us off with our first nugget, and I've asked Ed to kick us off. So what did you think of episodes 4 through 6? Or what's kind of top of mind as you think about kind of lasting lessons or takeaways?
Well, the first is actually, it's not as much about the content of the episodes last week, as much as it is about the way they're releasing them. So
interesting.
12 episodes. And so if this was when Andor first came out, they released them 1 per week. So we would have had a wonderful 3-month run or so of getting to enjoy these. However, they're releasing them 3 at a time in these, essentially 1-year segments leading up to to when Rogue One happens. And so I thought about with the last series of 3. My wife and I watched the first episode one night, and then we watched the next 2 the next day. And actually, we did that with this next new group. So we watched episode 7 last night. We're going to watch 8 and 9 tonight. And I thought I was trying to figure out how I felt about that, because I'm kind of sad a little bit that it's only going to be basically 4 weeks worth.
Same.
Dang, I wish it could be 12 or what have you.
Yep.
But I also was thinking about that it feels like a little bit of a response to one is the often toxic Star Wars fandom.
Okay.
Which is the, just split second reactions to, I didn't like that one thing, so the whole thing is terrible.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I feel like last week, the first episode worked. I mean, all of them were great, but worked because I was able to jump right into the next 2.
Interesting.
And so, but I think on its own, it probably would have been okay, so what's happening next? And
okay. Yeah.
So I thought about this was this a reaction to sort of the ways that So people didn't do so well with the slow burn of the Acolyte.
Mm-hmm.
That it was like, here was the episode, one episode, it was like, there's all these or these unfinished, or open questions. And people are like, well, we don't know. We don't know. And so why didn't we hated that first episode because there were all these questions of these characters we don't know and everything else. And so like the toxicity that just started right off the bat. And so yeah, so it was more just that is just
Mm.
a interesting of how we engage. Because I remember, back in the day, it was like you'd have your show and it would be once a week, no matter
Yeah,
what.
that's right.
And they so anyway, it's not as much a content thing as much as more just like a social reaction. So
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about the method of storytelling, right? And how do you take into account that this is the world that we live in now where everything is kind of instantly picked apart or reacted to, and there's a slow burn with this, right? We would kind of do the same thing. We're not late night people, so we have to kind of watch each of these three in installments, either one at a time or two at a time. And so I wonder, yeah, I haven't heard of why they did it as they did, but it does make sense that they're trying to maybe inoculate against some of the impatient and hair trigger, reactions of the fandom, because they're trying to do something pretty sophisticated, right? And so they don't want the kind of uh, fandom to get in the way of the pretty complicated story they're trying to tell, which I think is, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I have heard them described as 4 movies, basically, right? That they recorded these or filmed these 4 installments that really work as standalone movies that are linked together. But thinking about them that way, you hear them differently, right? Did you watch Lost when it came out back in the day?
oh yeah, loved
Yeah, I
it.
mean, and that was like once a week, and then you'd kind of have, I think before the kind of internet became this huge behemoth of opinion and speculation, it was really the first of its kind. And so what is it like as a fan and knowing that there what do you make of the fact that Star Wars attracts some of these, I mean, can be some of the most toxic fans? It's such a I don't understand it, and I know that and yet that's part of the subculture on the internet, is that they
Mhm.
just,
Yeah.
they can't be
Yeah.
pleased.
Exactly. And it, some of it I think is somewhat of a nostalgia that is a they didn't, people didn't see, and I don't know that at least the original 3 had kind of some layerings that I think some of the newer ones have, like some of the hate that came towards The Last Jedi. I mean, there was a
Mhm.
ton. There was so much layering in The Last Jedi and
Yeah.
story and stability that they ruined with the next one. Um,
Yes.
y-
Agree.
that so anyway, that's sort of getting a feel. But I think some of it is just that it's this nostalgia that, well, this isn't what Star Wars used to be,
Mm.
and
Yes.
and whether it was conscious or not, Star Wars was, other than Lando back, in the original 3, it was white, basically white male territory.
Right.
And then when you start bringing
Yeah.
in, Jedi who are women,
Mhm.
um, people of color, start bringing
Right.
in gender and everything else, all of a sudden it's, wait, but that's not what Star Wars used to be.
Yes. Right.
And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think it's significant that, I mean, Tony Gilroy, the showrunner, is famously not a Star Wars fan.
Mhm.
He's using it as a canvas to tell a really, as I said, sophisticated story. And I was thinking, so episodes 1 through 3, you have Krennic running that meeting in that, people have compared it to Hitler's Eagle's Nest, and that kind of and that meeting where they were planning the final solution. And then now in this next set of 3, You've got the French resistance, right? I mean, the Gormans with their berets and all of this. And I do kind of wonder, I'm not going to make any predictions, but what are the next three? Which aspect of that fascist world that Tony Gilroy seems so fascinated by, what's gonna be the next set piece and next thing that he thinks about. But I like thinking of him that way. Even the previous season, even though it came out one at a time, there were these chunks of story that had beginning, middle, and end. There was some connective tissue to the next one, and it feels very purposeful. To your point about doling those out differently. So
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I love it
yeah,
personally. I think it's great, but
yeah. I
other
mean, that's
than wanting to have it for 12 weeks.
I
So,
know. Yeah, that's part of the reason that I don't. I mean, the sooner I watch, the sooner it's over. So, and there's just so much, and knowing that there will not be a season 3 is just a particular heartbreak. Um, so my first kind of nugget, and there was so much in these three that it was just hard to kind of narrow these down into themes. But what I kept thinking about with these three, and I rewatched them last night and this morning, is thinking about the theme of kind of human frailty, which may kind of relate to yours of how we tell these stories and how people react to them, and the kind of humanity of our own world and how people sort of respond in good and not so good ways. But um, I was really struck this time. There's a point where Andor says when he goes to visit Luthen at the antiquities shop, we're not droids, right? The idea that we're human beings, and I think so many aspects of this, especially these last three, really drive that home. That this rebellion, this revolution, is built on just people. That you have great power there, but also incredible vulnerability. I mean, even Luthen, right? Luthen, who famously gives that amazing speech in season 1, where he's like, you know, my mind is a sunless space, and I've given everything. I've sacrificed everything to this. He wants to control so badly all of these chess pieces, but even he's kind of starting to come unraveled a little bit, right? In this latest installment, he's like, this is getting too big for us, like, this is getting beyond me. I can't control this anymore. So even it's like his wig is coming askew a little bit, right? Because he's a human being, and these human beings are doing this incredibly difficult thing. I was thinking about this. In fact, I might write about this for the Blue Room on Friday. That line where Andor says it's when we start to relax that the trauma comes back, or that, we realize the enormity of what's going on. And I got sick when I went away to preacher camp, like that's what happens, right? We kind of grind, we do our thing, we're kind of in the midst of it. And then when we step back, that's when our bodies remind us, you're not droids, right?
yeah,
And so, yeah,
Big said the same thing. Like the dreams came back.
exactly, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when they're in that safe house, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, and I'm curious what you think about this. There's in one of her dreams with Dr. Gorst, he says something like everyone has their own revolution or rebellion or something like that. I've been thinking about that and wondering what you made of that comment, which kind of relates to what my second nugget will be when we get there. But what does that mean to you? The idea that everyone has their own rebellion or own revolution. I don't remember which word he used.
Everyone has their own rebellion. That was
Yeah. Okay.
and actually that was my next thing I was going to bring up. So
Oh, okay. Well, let's
perfect.
go
Well
there and
done.
we'll see.
Well
Yeah.
done.
Good.
Well done. So first of all, related to that, one of the things last week or the first trio of episodes, talked about that, how in the first scene, it almost kind of like set up everything that was kind of the
Oh,
main
yeah.
a theme that was going to be
Hmm.
throughout the rest. And I felt like there was that same thing of, everyone having their own rebellion throughout that. And it felt like many of the characters had those different points about how they were trying to do their own rebellion. So you had Mon Mothma kind of going around and lobbying
Mm.
other senators, and then her moment of when they're kind of making that like loyalty oath where she had to like leave, like she just couldn't keep doing it. Um, and then uh, you had Bix wanting to be more involved again and not being allowed. Um, Cassian kind of being the judge of the Gormans of how they were doing their rebellion.
Hmm.
Um, and Cyril sort of maybe, I don't
Intriguing. Yeah.
intriguing.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was something that stirred for me, and where it went for me was how, and I've seen this in the last few months, kind of post inauguration. Um, Saw it before, where we kind of move into this role of kind of gatekeep people move into this role of gatekeeping
Mm-hmm.
of who is doing rebellion right.
Yeah.
Um, and that it is this, if you're not doing X, Y, and Z, well, then you're not doing enough, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not, and so, or the people who kind of themselves feel like, because I can't do X, Y, and Z, well, then I'm not doing enough. There's a dear woman in the congregation I serve right now who has some physical limitations right now. She wants to get out and march every single time
Mm.
there's a protest. She physically can't, and it's just driving her crazy.
Yeah.
And and so like even for her, it's the sense of I can't do what I feel like I need to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. So how do you give opportunities? That makes a lot of sense. I was thinking of where my mind went and I got stuck here was like being at war with oneself, like a rebellion within oneself.
Mhm,
But yeah, the way you're framing that makes a lot of sense, and that everybody has their role to play. We talked about this a little bit last week of Luthen, like, do you need, like, Luthen kind of feels like it's better if you don't have any attachments, if you've already given everything up and you only have the mission. And what we're seeing, and I think it relates to my idea about kind of human frailty, is like, no, people have connections, people have people that they love and want to protect. And is it either or? And I think what you're helping me think about is everybody has their own motivation for doing it, and that's okay, right? I mean, I think about going back to your example, real world example. There's a person that I know who, on the day of the hands off march, she lives in kind of a retirement assisted living facility, and they were out there on the sidewalk of their place with their walkers and their canes, and they were just on the street, just waving to people or carrying signs or whatever. And I just thought that is amazing to me, right? So, how do we help people find their own way?
mhm,
Um, and the other thing that just came to me is thinking about Cassian. Like, Cassian says to the Gormans, "You all aren't ready. You have no idea what you're doing, right?" And he wants to just not, be a part of what they're doing. And I think it's who's the main guy in Gorman, the Twill guy who also is the
yeah,
the father, right?
yeah. The guy who
He's
reminds me of Peter Capaldi from Back to the Future.
right, right, exactly. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's like, "You're not much of a revolutionary, are you?" And if everyone has their own rebellion, these people want to fight for their home, right? And they're naive, but they're courageous enough to take that chance. And maybe that is a bit of gatekeeping on Andor, Cassian's part to say, "No, you are not." Now, tragic things happened, right? So it's complicated, right? But yeah, the gatekeeping can be a little it can be a little paternalistic to say, I know what rebellion looks like and you're not ready.
Mhm,
So
yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
but there's also with that I think about like how there's kind of like those temptations of when some, whatever, event precipitates outrage, protest, rebellion, whatever, then it's like, okay, we got to start a new organization. Like we got to,
Mm.
that as opposed to just partner with the people who have been consistently doing the work
Mhm. Yeah.
and and trust those who've already been in the fight,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
that it isn't, just now, oh yeah, okay, now, you know, these people can, and I'm as guilty of that as anybody else.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so there's kind of a flip side to that is, yeah, everybody
Yes.
has their own rebellion, but sometimes you need to have the trust that those who've already been, like in Andor's, in Cassian's case, Cassian's been doing this. Like,
Yes. Oh, that's good.
yeah.
Yeah, so everyone has their own rebellion is an affirmation and a caution. I'm not sure what the other side of that is, but um I'm I'm thinking about I was talking to someone last week at with the clergy group that I was with, and he had gone to Cuba pretty soon after Trump was elected the first time, and was talking to this pastor down there whose name was Jesus, actually, and who Jesus said, "Trump is good for you." And my friend was like, "What are you talking about? This is awful." And he said, "He's a mirror. He is holding up a mirror to the culture around you that you have been unwilling to see, but the rest of the world has seen that this is part of who America is." So, to your point about people already in this fight, we talked about this a little bit last week with the kind of race and class discussion with Mon and Vel. Um, people have been people have seen more clearly than people who look like you and I have seen for much longer. So can people who look like you and me follow their lead rather than, yeah, to your point, let's create a whole new thing and this our own little bespoke rebellion that's not really going to get us very far. So,
Yeah.
anything else you wanted to say about? I think mine blended into yours about having your own rebellion, but anything else
Mhm.
on that one?
Not, yeah. The only other note that I had was, and it's sort of the same thing as gatekeeping, but kind of like the purity tests,
Yeah.
um, and that's one of the things that drives me nuts about, like our current political situation, that left or right, it sort of feels like if you're not all in with everything on
Right.
left or right, that you're not pure enough. You're not,
Yeah. Yeah.
and um and so that was the only other thing that I thought of with,
Hmm.
with that is like, um so like right now I, talked with a friend of mine who, he is Caucasian, but he is partnered with a group of predominantly African American clergy who are theologically very different from him,
Mm.
um, in a lot of ways, but they all have a deep passion for the poor and the underserved.
Mhm.
And and so one of the things that this pastor shared with me that they've kind of agreed not to talk about and not to engage with right now is around sexuality and gender,
Mhm.
because they're the the predominance of this group is not in support of full participation, inclusion, so forth. But there is the, kind of Venn diagram overlapping of, yes, but we are passionate about the poor.
Mm.
And where this person is a pastor, that is the biggest need, is around poverty. And so it's like, okay, I can partner with these folks who I don't agree with everything on,
Mhm.
but we can partner together on this thing that we all know has major problems and needs
Yeah.
solutions.
Yeah.
So there's also that purity of like, he could have said, well, because you don't agree with A, B, and C, then we're not going to work together. Or they could have said that about him.
Yeah.
Well, because you don't agree on A, B, and it's all three, you're not working with us. And they're like, no,
Mhm.
you're part of this community too. So I think that, how do we yes, recognize we all have a little bit of our own rebellions, but how do we also allow those Venn diagrams to overlap in the places where they can,
Mm.
to where we
Yeah,
can partner together instead of
that's great.
having all these little blips out
Yep.
there.
Yeah, there's that wonderful, contradiction in the scripture where Jesus at one point says, "Anyone who is not against us is for us, and anyone who is not for us is against us." It's somewhere else, right? And so kind of if they're doing something that, um, complements what you're doing, but they're doing it in a different way or with a different crowd or, whatever, if they're not getting in your way, let them do their thing. I mean, now,
Yep.
there's elsewhere in the scripture where he's like, "No, you gotta be part of our thing." So it's a little bit complicated, right? But, um, that's hard work. I mean, in community organizing, one of the principles is no permanent allies, no permanent enemies, right? Or adversaries. So if you can find someone who has common cause with you, even if you're not 100% unanimous, you should go for it. So,
Mhm.
um, anyway, okay. So my last one I think was kind of connected to that, which is just I think we see in these episodes the complications of working in community. So the idea that everyone has, I mean, this is connected to everyone has their own rebellion because everyone has their own goal, right? Andor tells the Gormans, "You all are not ready." Uh, you know, I mean, very first meeting with Enza, he's like, "You have no idea who I am. Like, you think I'm the person that you want to talk to, and thankfully I am, but I could be anyone." And he points out just how kind of unsophisticated they are. But she's like, "This is my home. We have to fight." Right. And Andor, on the other hand, is a little like, we're also trying to protect, like, I think he wants to minimize the loss of life. Like, if these Gormans go into this, something bad's going to happen. And I don't want to be a part of it. And he wants to protect Bix and he wants to protect himself to some extent. And Luthen's like, "Nope, the bigger slaughter, the better, because that's going to be a huge conflagration that's going to be visible throughout the galaxy,
The
right? If the
flame will
Gormans go
burn
down,
brightly.
it'll burn brightly. Exactly. So, how do when you are building a movement, how or can you? Maybe it's just too impossible when you create or when you reach a critical mass. I think this is what Luthen's thinking about is like no one. This movement now does not have all the same goals. Like I have my goals, and I mean we haven't even talked about Saw Gerrera. That's a whole nother thing. You know, Mon is trying to get whip votes for like getting rid of the PORD, which is the kind of crackdown, which is causing suffering, right? And Luthen would be like, who cares? Like, I mean, more suffering, the faster we get to rebellion. So, um, I don't really have a point here. I'm just kind of thinking about just how complicated it is to do movement work. And the bigger the movement gets, the more that you do kind of have to let people have their own agency. But can you create a sense of shared mission, even if everybody goes about that mission differently? And I had one more thing on the kind of community piece, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. Mon is trying to get people to vote with her on this legislation, and no, she cannot get anyone to her side. And it got me thinking about our current kind of need for courage, and law firms and universities, and how you need just a few. Like, courage is contagious, right? So if you get a couple to stick their neck out, then more can follow and be inspired by that. And so there is some safety in numbers, because if you all stick together, you can maybe do more that way and you feel some insulation and protection. And I mean, everything that I think you can say about leadership and movements is also the opposite you see in the show, because Grand Moff Tarkin, killed all those people on Gorman because he just landed his ship on top of this kind of crowd of people. So 200 people or something were killed. And the bellhop who's talking to Cassian says, "We thought our numbers would protect us, and they didn't." In fact, the fact that people kept coming, I mean, like, more people died as a result. So I don't know what to do with that other than just name the contradiction there.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Mm. Yeah, that this kind of flows with my next too. So
Go for it.
which is control.
Yeah.
That eventually, I want to say something about last night.
Don't do it.
Okay. But is is the nature of control. And when when Luthen had his thing and it was just him and Clea, just the two of them, and with a few things here and there, that's manageable.
Um,
And the more people are brought in, the messier it gets, and the harder community gets.
Yeah.
And that the different layers of what people are willing to do, like with Andor or with Cassian and with Bix, is they want to, they want to hold on to each other. They want to hold on to, because they've already both lost so much. Not only do they seem to be in love with each other, but they also want to they don't want to lose more.
Yeah.
But then you have Luthen who's like, whatever, I've already lost it all and I'm losing it. I don't care.
Right.
I still want to know his motivation. But
Definitely.
yeah, that's the next Disney show is Luthen.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Or at least a comic book series. That would be fine too.
Yes.
So, but even, you had it with the ISB, with the Imperials, that, we're getting too much information. We can't process, we're arresting all these people, but there's too much for us to take in. So yeah, like I think about the nature of community. It just it's messy. It gets really messy. And this flashed back to me when I was a kid. My mom would always, like, if I said, "Oh, I've got two friends coming over," she'd be like, "Well, why don't you get another one?" Because her thing she felt like whenever you add three, one person gets left out. I don't know if there's some like unresolved trauma for her with that in her life. I don't know.
Being a third wheel.
Yeah, but there is something to that. When my wife and I, our first kids, were twins, and then we had our surprise third, and we were seeing a what we called our preemptive marriage counselor at the time. Trying to do some like heading off some things. And when we told him that we were pregnant with a third, Dell brought up this thing of like, you know what? That kid's going to be a disruptor because that kid's going to get born into two sets of units.
Yes.
And not that, our youngest has made our family like, a mess or something, not at all, but definitely created a new system and created something, a new dynamic that is still very much there. So, so I think there is, so that's kind of my, I guess, kind of response to what you were saying, but also that piece of that other area for me with these episodes is the control and how desperate they were each to still try to keep control. And what lengths Cassian was willing to go, what lengths Luthen was willing to go, what lengths the Imperials were willing to go. So
yeah. Well, and not only people come in with their own motivations and they do disrupt the status quo, and that's kind of what we see in that scene where Luthen's kind of coming unhinged. He's like, we're losing control of this. And Clea's like, pull yourself together, and not only do people have their own motivations, but when you join the movement, you're going to have different kind of motivations too. So you kind of got the naive Gorman, not naive, but like neophyte Gormans, right? Like, we got to fight for this, but we are still learning tactics. We're still learning strategy. And then you've got Saw Gerrera, who's been at this a long time and has, gone all the way to just kind of strategic insanity, I guess. I don't know what to call that. And by the way, another thing that I found really oddly refreshing about this show is, I don't know how to put this. I mean, I grew up, you and I are about the same age. We grew up in the 80s of just say no about drugs, but there's kind of this matter-of-factness, I guess, about Bix is on this medication that's some kind of sedative or like helps her with the trauma, and yet it's not great because it's going to have an effect if she goes off of it. And then you've got Saw, who's like, the
rhino.
Yes, huffing the rhino. And it's such a kind of, forgive the pun, fuel for him. They live in really abject, difficult circumstances, and they're just doing the best they can. And I guess there's such a stigma around substance abuse. And I like that in recent years we've connected. I think we're starting to connect that substance use is about self-medication of trauma or depression or hopelessness, whatever. And I think we can approach it differently and with some compassion if we go in with that kind of perspective. That's just a side note.
Well, and Luthen actually responded to Bix fairly compassionately.
Right, yeah.
Like when he found that little vial, it wasn't, him launching off of like, how dare, what are you doing, or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, it was him. Apparently, he's done it too.
Right.
Of I've been there, and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it wasn't although I do wonder, like when he put out the Cassian signal at the end, which sort of gave them I'm assuming, because they didn't really, I don't think they actually showed that, had Luthen giving Cassian and Bix the info about the doctor.
Correct. That if that happens, it's off screen.
Yeah.
But that's the assumption, is that he gave him this assignment.
Yeah, but it was almost like, for me was that Luthen going, okay, she needs to be able to do something.
Yeah.
That is gonna because it's not gonna get rid of that Imperial program.
Right.
That's not gonna go away.
I
doubt.
Well, I mean, it does seem. I mean, as somebody said in a podcast I listened to, like, surely they've uploaded all that information to the cloud, right? That killing him is not gonna get rid of it. But yeah, that had a strategic purpose, but also a human. I mean, it's all strategy for Luthen, because he's like, I need Bix back on the board. But it also was cathartic for her. And I think that kind of goes back to a through line of our conversations that we've talked about. It's not just what we're fighting for, but what are we fighting to protect? Who are we fighting for? All of those kinds of things. Well, you've already watched one episode, but let's any quick predictions for the next few? I'm springing this on you.
So I trying to remember. So I think this may have been in the house of our podcast.
Yeah.
Where we talked about the gun that Bix was holding as she was watching Good Morning Coruscant.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Cracked me up. But and that they think is the same gun that Cassian uses to kill Krennic in Rogue One. I'm just wondering if in this next trio of episodes, because the next ones right after this will be the ones leading right into Rogue One.
Yeah.
So I have a bad feeling about things for Bix. That's my
Yeah.
gut.
Yeah.
I, I just,
Yeah.
so I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. My prediction, or maybe it's just hope casting, is that, I mean, anyone that we don't see in Rogue One is fair game for being dead. I mean, we got Mon Mothma, Saw Gerrera. I wonder if Melshi will show up again. And is that it? My hopeful prediction is that there'll be at least a character or two that um, that doesn't meet their demise, but gets shunted off somewhere. Um, and I think Luthen's a goner. Um, I'm intrigued by Clea. I've heard some speculation, and again, these are all speculative, that Clea will be the one to, like Luthen starts to be compromised in some way, and that she has to give the order to take him off the board, which is just the ultimate, that kind of dramatic irony. But yeah, we will see.
Yeah. Oh, there was one
Yeah,
other thing. Actually, one other I
yes,
was first remembering. So it was Mon didn't get a whole lot of play in these last couple episodes. Um, but there were two things in kind of her conversations that I made note of. One of them was when talking with, it was, I believe, the Gorman senator, um, who said that doesn't want to do anything because he was afraid of chafing the emperor.
yeah,
And yeah, I think about that with politics today of,
mm,
we don't want to do anything that will alienate me from the president or will alienate me from, my voters or
right,
and that there wasn't the bold courageous step of, yeah, and I may lose my office, I may lose my job, I may lose my life,
yeah,
I may lose my freedom or whatever, but what is right to do? And would and also though, would speaking out actually make it even worse? So like
mhm,
it's just that was
yes,
complicated. The other one was, and this was I it was one of those that when I watched it the second time, I was like, okay, yes, I did hear that. It was just in this hallway conversation that she had with one of the senators who said, I believe it because I feel it.
I noticed that the second time. Yep,
And, what is the nature of truth? Like,
yeah,
is there no, this is true,
right,
and, well, no, I believe it because I read it on the internet, or I believe it
right,
because it was a professionally formatted email that I got and it looked like something legit. Or
yep,
so, yeah, there was, the whole thing started with the Berlin or the Hitler's conference thing of,
mhm,
what kind of propaganda and everything else we can do.
yeah,
But that was those were those other pieces of just like, yeah, the propaganda's working. And you saw it
yeah,
with Cyril's mom,
yeah.
and um
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I'm reading a book right now, recommended by a friend called, I think it's called Preaching in Hitler's Shadow. And it's sermons of resistance during the Third Reich. And there's a extended introduction that just talks about the way that the German Christians completely were co-opted by Hitler's nationalist message of Christianity and Germanness being kind of intertwined. Um, and the kind of Jewishness of Jesus is completely de-emphasized. It's all about strength. It's not about mercy. I mean, uh, the precursor of Christian nationalism, basically. Um, and there are examples in there of exactly that. I think Victor Klemperer is quoted in the introduction of, I mean, all of the way the propaganda worked on people, and it's like, and it really was, I believe Hitler because I feel it. And I guess the question, maybe this is the question to send our people out with who have so kindly joined us for this conversation is what, I mean, even the stuff with the dolls, like the tariff stuff of like maybe you need to get by with fewer dolls for your kids. I don't have a problem with that. But for what purpose? Like, what is the sacrifice for something noble, for something good, for something that's going to bring about healing and justice for the world? Then, yeah. I mean, people sacrificed in World War II because it was a cause worth fighting for, it was worth dying for. I don't see it, So it's not the sacrifice that is problematic. It's the reason for it. And so, what are we who want to be the kind of loyal opposition to the ideals of our nation? What are we offering as here is worth sacrificing for? Here's worth giving your life to. That's the thing I think about all the time. So
yeah, and gets back to what kind of revolution, what's your own rebellion?
That's right.
What kind of, or even the question that the guy said, or not really a question, statement says to Andor, "You're not much of a revolutionary, are you?"
Right.
That,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Because he's wanting to protect and yeah,
Mhm.
but that comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And the Gormans are desperate. They feel that like they need to act. So.
Mhm.
Well, Ed, thank you for a great conversation. And for those of you who joined us, what a thrill to have you all along. And we will put this on up on Substack as a recording. So feel free to share with friends. And we'll be back next week with episodes 7 through 9. And then we need to do some scheduling, Ed, because I'm heading to Scotland, and I'm not sure when we're going to get to 10 through 12, but we'll figure it out, and we will let everybody know via the usual channels. But anyway,
Okay.
so
All right.
Thank you all,
Thank y'all.
and we'll see you next time.
You got it. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.